Welcome. You're here now. The present world, with its blinking lights, restless thoughts, and ticking clocks, slowly begins to fade away. Let your breath slow, your limbs relax, and your mind begin to drift. Tonight, we travel along a road, not a single path, but a braided ribbon across centuries, stretched between east and west, a road lined not, but with dust, wind, and whispering languages. This is the Silk Road, the soft creak of leather straps, the rustle of fabric in a camel's pack. But this journey won't race. There is no need to hurry. We move gently, not toward any destination. Over the next few hours, we'll follow the path of traders and monks, of women weaving in small villages, of merchants with silk tucked under their robes, and rulers watching it all, from shaded pavilions with silver goblets in hand. Our journey will take us through 4 gentle chapters. First, a slow immersion in the daily life of a caravan. Then the winding tale of a man whose real footsteps shaped trade across an empire. After that, a soft dive into the mysteries of forgotten desert cities buried in time. And finally, a glimpse into the quiet luxury of the elite, those who never walked the road, but controlled its flow. So now, close your eyes if you wish, let go of today, and step softly onto the Silk Road, daily life immersion. On the road, with the caravan. Imagine yourself wrapped in warmth, a thick woolen blanket pulled up to your chin, comforting. Your eyes are closed, and yet you're not truly asleep. Instead, you re-drifting in that in-between space, not unlike the desert air itself, waiting for the world to wake. You hear little at first, just a slow wind, only the occasional muffled shift, a soft snort from one of the camels. You are somewhere near Khoton, but names don't mean much. Here, the land doesn't offer its identity. It's not marked by grand signs or clear borders, only by feel. The flavor of the dust, the crunch beneath your bedroll when you shift ever so slightly. The stars above you still blaze. The night sky, a vast bowl of ancient, glittering patterns, unfamiliar, but somehow comforting. They're the same stars seen by countless others who've crossed these lands. Persian traders in fine linen tunics, Buddhists, monks, nomadic horsemen who slept in furs. You are part of a caravan. Today it is your turn to lace up your sandals with cracked fingers, to tie down cargo with quiet care, to carry silk, or salt, or stories. From one silence into another, the camp around you is beginning to stir. A fire crackles faintly, coaxed to life by one of the younger travelers, the boy whose job it is to rise first. He works without talking. You watch him through half-lidded eyes. He leans close to the embers, breathing softly. There's a flicker, then a low glow. It dances across the sand, casting long shadows of ropes and saddlebags. The others begin to wake. No one speaks loudly. Voices, if they come, are murmured. A phrase whispered in Sogdian. Language isn't fixed here. It flows. You've picked up bits and pieces. The smell of smoke thickens. There's a sweetness to it, mixed with yesterday's sweat. and the lingering sharpness of pickled onions still tucked in someone's sack. You rise slowly, wrapping your blanket tighter. As you sit up, the cold has crept in. Your bedding is simple. Just a pad of wool, perhaps a second layer, not for comfort, but to keep the ground from drawing all the warmth from your body. Beside you, a tall Bactrian camel stirs, its massive eyes blink slowly, the long lashes catching early starlight. It yawns a deep. You place your hand gently on its shoulder. Dusty, it grumbles, not in complaint, but recognition. You've known this animal for weeks. It carries part of your load. A wooden chest filled with dyed cloth. You do not speak to it. Around the camp, a man tightens a rope around a stack of ceramic jars. A woman pours water from a skin into a shallow copper basin. The water is cold. No one complains. You gather your things slowly. Your satchel is stiff with dust. Inside, a cloth bundle holds your days. Ration stale bread, hard cheese, a few dates. Not a feast, but sustenance. The fire is stronger now. Flames reach up. A kettle. Soon it will bubble, and someone will steep a handful of dried herbs into a bitter tea. The warmth, more than the taste, is what matters. And now, the pack leader arrives. He does not speak much. He walks the perimeter of the camp, his long robe trailing behind him, sleeves tied back. He glances toward. The sky is thinning. The stars beginning to retreat. He carries a staff, more symbolic than practical, and a ledger bound in oiled leather. He will note who is here, who left in the night. He will check each animal, each load. You nod to him as he passes. He returns the gesture. It is neither approval nor reproach. He will not hurry the group. Time does not move fast here. The journey is measured not in miles, but in endurance. You begin helping with the loading. The cargo is tied with cloth and rope, padded with straw. Care is taken with delicate goods, porcelain wrapped in wool, crystal tucked into layers of leather, but most things can be jostled. They are packed for travel, not display. Your camel lowers itself for you. It huffs once, then rises. The sky is now pale blue. A line of light rests on the eastern ridge, soft as cotton, but its shadow is already here. You take one last glance at the camp. The fire will be doused soon, and slowly, almost without signal, the caravan begins to move. One by one, the animals fall into line. The led camel steps forward, then another, then yours. There is no rush, no fanfare, the sound of sand beneath hooves, the sway of your pack, the tightening of your scarf around your face as the first wind picks up. You are walking, not toward a destination, but into a day, a rhythm, a silence shared by hundreds across centuries. You do not know what you will find tonight. Perhaps another camp, perhaps a stone ruined where others once slept. But for now, you follow the path and the desert ahead, but it is rising, quietly, almost reluctantly, as if it too would rather stay tucked beneath the folds of the horizon. The world has turned pale. A soft gold unfurls across the edges of the land, dustier. And so you walk. There is no conversation, not yet. Only the hush of fabric swaying with each step. The muffled clink of metal trinkets. The world is not silent, but hushed, restrained, as though the landscape itself demands reverence. You fall into rhythm quickly. It is a rhythm learned by necessity, each step mindful of the ground. Soft where there is sand, uneven where the wind has sculpted small ridges. Your feet do not strike hard. They glide, a kind of shared choreography between body and earth. Your breath deepens. You don't speak, but your senses are awake. To the glint of sunlight on the back of the camel ahead, to the occasional flutter of a bird far off, where green hints at a stream bed, to the feel of your satchel. This is how the morning unfolds on the Silk Road. Not in dramatic events, but in endurance and repetition and acceptance. You pass a small cairn by the side of the path, a pile of stones carefully stacked, weather-worn, some painted faintly with ochre or ink. Someone has left a dried blossom tucked into the top. You do not touch it, but you glance at it with respect. A marker, a memory. Beside you walks an older man. He smells faintly of frankincense, but he has been with your group for weeks. Occasionally he hums softly as he walks, as if remembering music that once came from someone else. His pace is slow, deliberate. You match it. Behind you, some of them groan. One emits a deep, throaty sound. A reminder that the animals, too, are weary. You look down at the ground. The sand is not always yellow. Sometimes it is a pale grey, sometimes reddish, sometimes nearly white. So bright under the sun. You pass over places where ancient wheels once left faint grooves. No wagons now, only animals. But those lines remain, scratches in the land. A light breeze kicks up. It lifts a veil of dust from the path. It tickles the back of your neck. Your thoughts begin to drift. You remember your home, not in clear images. The smell of warm millet porridge, the sound of temple bells in the early morning, the roughness of your grandmother's hands. You let these memories come, not with longing, but with calm. You think about the next stop, a known wellspring, perhaps a small outpost where salted meat and hard dates can be purchased. Someone mentioned that they have honey there. Real honey. You've not had any in months. You look up and see a bird pass overhead. A kite, its wings held stiff as it glides. It vanishes behind a ridge. You pass another caravan, coming from the opposite direction. Their camels are thinner, their faces darker from sun and wind. A boy in their group raises his hand in greeting. You return the gesture. Fingers raised in silence. It is enough. A small conversation is exchanged between leaders, spoken in a blend of Persian and Chinese, with Arabic loanwords folded in. You hear snippets. Storm last week. Bandits 3, valleys east. Better to travel west through the gorge. Some is kept. Most is let go. You continue. The sun is higher now. It begins to press down. Your clothes cling with sweat. There is a stone outcrop ahead. You know the path winds around it. And just beyond, there will be a low dip in the land where a cluster of thorn trees grows. That's where you'll rest. As you near it, the ground grows firmer, less sand, more packed earth. Scattered pebbles. You pass another shrine. A small figure has been etched into the stone. Someone has left an offering there. A few coins, half-per, a scrap of silk ribbon. The caravan slows. The leader raises his staff once, and then the word is passed. Back, rest. You sigh. A slow, grateful release. The march has ended, and yet the morning remains with you. Not as memory, but as feeling. The road has not changed you. Your body buzzes with the subtle ache of effort. Your mind is quiet. Your thoughts softened. You take a drink. Let the water rest in your mouth before swallowing. The camels kneel. Saddles creak. You stretch your back. Roll your shoulders. The sky is bright now, sharp and endless. The shadows have shrunk, but the road continues, and soon the sun has risen high now. It hangs in the center of the sky, heavy, still, its rays no longer warming, but pressing down like a hand that does not lift. You are seated now, not standing, not walking. The march has paused. Around you, the caravan settles into temporary stillness. Blankets stretched for shade between poles and saddle frames. Packs cracked open. Men and women squatting in small groups, their hands cupped over steaming bowls, or sipping carefully from narrow-necked flasks. Calm, muted by the heat, you sit with your legs drawn up, resting your arms atop your knees. You are tired, but not exhausted. Not yet. The midday rest. The camels lie curled into themselves, legs folded, eyes half closed, their broad sides rising and falling with each breath. They don't seek shade, they don't need to, but you do. Your shade is small, the edge of a canopy made from rough linen. It does not cover your whole body, but it's enough. Beside you, just assembling. There is no fire now. Not in this heat. It would draw too much from the air. Not fragrant, but dense and tough, made from barley or millet, with a crust that crackles under your teeth. It was baked days ago, but in this dry air, you tear a piece off slowly. Hold it in your hand. Feel its weight, its texture. Then you dip it into a clay cup of goat's yogurt, thick, sour, and cool. From having been buried beneath the sand during the march, it is not a feast, but it satisfies. Beside you, someone opens a small pouch of dried apricots, their orange skins wrinkled and fragrant. You take one. Chew slowly. The sweetness is sudden, intense, but gone quickly. Another traveler, a younger man with a headscarf pulled low over his brow, has pulled out a flask of date syrup, thick and dark. He pours a few drops onto a scrap of bread. You smile in return. This is how the midday unfolds, of peace. Your canteen is half empty. You unscrew the lid, just enough to moisten your lips, just enough to keep going. It tastes slightly metallic, a hint of the bronze spout, but it's clean. In the silence of the rest, your senses become keener. You notice the small flies buzzing at the edges of things, the way the sand has stuck to your ankles where you spilled water earlier, the distant clang of a bell, one of the pack animals. You see a man sharpening a blade, not for battle, but for utility. The blade used to trim fabric, cut rope, carve dried meat. You see a woman writing in a small ledger, marks made carefully with a brush and ink. Even though the parchment flutters slightly in the breeze, everything moves slowly, as if the air itself resists motion. The only other sound is breathing, and beyond that, there is no shade beyond this camp. Only the vast openness of the desert. Ridges rise and fall in the near distance, pale and bleached, their outlines blurred, softened, as if the world itself were folding in on itself. You feel it in your chest, that deep awareness of vastness. You are small. The caravan is smaller. The desert is infinite, and still you are here, alive and at peace. A small breeze stirs. It brings no cool, and yet it feels like a blessing. A boy walks past with a water skin. You nod your thanks as he pours. Nearby, someone begins to hum a tune, perhaps a lullaby remembered from childhood. The melody drifts across the camp. No one joins in. No one interrupts. It simply exists, then fades. A merchant, seated cross-legged, opens a small chest at his side. Inside, he checks his stock. Bolts of fabric wrapped in waxed cloth, tiny ceramic jars of cinnamon bark, cubes of indigo dye nestled in straw. He does not count them out loud. He does not boast. This is not a market. This is a pause. Even trade sleeps in the midday heat. Someone scratches a mark into a stone. Not graffiti, just a symbol, perhaps a personal seal, perhaps a message to another traveler who will pass here in days or weeks. You wonder who will sit in this exact spot in another year or another 100. Will they taste the same yogurt? Will the same wind brush their cheek? Changed. They pass, like the clouds above. You take another bite of bread, another sip of water, and then lie back, propped on your elbow, your scarf shielding your face from the light. A brief nap might come, not a deep sleep, a soft unraveling of thoughts. This is the heat. This is the center of the day, and everything settles. Soon, a voice will rise, a signal to begin again. Blankets will be folded, straps tightened. The march resumed, but not yet. For now, there is only water, and bread, and breath, and you, still, listening. The rest has ended. The sun has begun to slip, and the shadows are long once more. The heat remains, but it no longer scorches, instead rising in soft waves from the stones beneath your feet. The afternoon march was quieter than the morning. Voices gave way to silence. Even the animals trudged more slowly. The wind begins to cool, and with it comes relief. You look ahead. A cluster of low scrub and rock signals the next campsite, not chosen at random, but known. marked by those who came before, used by travelers from distant cities. Camels groan in recognition. We are here for tonight. And so, once again, there is no rush, no need for shouting or command. Every traveler knows their task. Blankets unfurled, gear laid out in familiar, quiet circles. You untie your bundle, the same place in your camel-s load where you stored it this morning. Inside, a fresh wrap of cloth to change into, your leather water pouch, a reed brush for your teeth, and a wooden comb with worn, uneven teeth. Rub your calf. The wind carries a different scent. Now, more dust, but also the rich, dry musk of the camels at rest, and the very faint smell of lentils cooking in an iron pot nearby. Someone, likely the same older woman who tends the cooking fire, has begun preparing the evening meal. It is simple. It always is. But there's something about dinner after a march. Even the plainest stew tastes like celebration. You don't expect spices. Those are expensive, carefully packed. But the cook uses what she has. Dried onion, split peas, a handful of wild herbs found earlier near a trickle of water. The pot hisses. Your stomach tightens gently. Not from hunger exactly, but from a quiet anticipation. You drink from your flask. Still warm, still metallic, but refreshing. Around the camp, some travelers clean their boots with scraps of cloth. Others kneel beside bowls of water. You hear the soft scrape of metal on stone. Someone sharpening a blade. Another hums a tune. One of those long winding melodies with no clear beginning and no real end. The camels are fed. Their mouths chew in slow, grinding circles. Their long lashes flick lazily. They are creatures built for this life. Uncomplaining, patient, wiser in some ways than the humans they carry. You find a spot beside a small rock, smooth enough to sit, high enough to rest your back. A bowl is handed to you, a bit of flatbread. You nod in thanks. The woman who hands it to you says nothing, but her eyes crinkle kindly. That is enough. You eat slowly, not rich, but honest. You watch the flames. Someone tosses in a bundle of dry sagebrush. It crackles differently. Smoke curls up and disappears into the darkening sky, and above, the stars return one by one. Tiny lights flicker into existence. The blue of twilight deepens into velvet. The stone still warm behind you. Your blanket pulled loosely over your legs. All around you. The camp settles further. Voices quiet. Laughter subsides. Only murmurs. Now, only the occasional cough. The shift of fabric. You trace them with your eyes. But patterns that feel familiar all the same. The same stars that looked down on the monk from Dunhuang, on the merchant from Antioch, on the scholar from Buk, on the child born in a caravan tent. The same stars that watch the desert grow and retreat. That will remain long after all the footprints are gone. You feel your body grow heavier. The ache of a day, well traveled. The calm of ritual. The gentleness of repetition. The fire dims, the air cools, your eyes blink, and then remain closed. Somewhere, a bell rings, faint not urge, just a sound marking time. The journey continues, but for you, there is no motion left. Only stillness, only breath, only the soft cradle of earth beneath you, and the stars above keeping silent watch. The Han court and the Emperor's vision, it is quiet. The kind of quiet that settles not from stillness, but from discipline, control, a silence that has weight, not absence. You are now far from the desert, far from the creak of saddlebags and the bleat of distant animals. Now you stand within the hush of polished stone corridors, within the vast, ordered center of a living empire. This is Chang'an. It is not a city of noise. Imagine yourself walking through its palace grounds before sunrise, the scent of pine resin and powdered sandalwood drifting on the early breeze. Somewhere nearby, a scribe grinds ink with slow, circular motions. The inkstone murmurs, a broche waits. You pass through wooden doors, balance between earth and sky. Between past and present is the world of Emperor Wu. He sits on a raised platform, her-backed and expressionless, draped in layered robes of silk so fine, the fabric whispers when he moves. He rarely speaks, and when he does, his voice is soft, never raised. Before him stand courtiers, scholars, diviners, each awaiting a nod, a question. Maps are brought forward, not the kind you and I might recognize, but scrolls unrolled on lacquered tables, lines inked across paper made from bark and cloth pulp, mountains marked with care, rivers traced with thin red brushes. Symbols show borders, animals, tribes. Beyond the western mountains, beyond the Jade Gate, there is space, a blankness. There are rumors of distant peoples who fight with powerful horses, of cities where goods, of allies who might help push back the Xiongnu, the steppe raiders who press against the Han borders. The Emperor listens, not with eagerness, but with something softer, strategy. He does not desire conquest. He desires connection, not to rule the far west. And so, quietly, he selects a man, not a general, not a noble, but a courtier, an official who had served him in bureaucratic posts, known not for drama or charisma, but for steadiness. Zhongqian. He is methodical, sharp-eyed. He bows low, listens, and agrees. The mission is simple, in structure, if not in scope. Go west. Find the USE. Return with knowledge. It is not a pilgrimage. It is not even trade. It is diplomacy at the edge of the world. And so, the preparations begin. Zhongqian is given escorts, translators, provisions, packed carefully into lacquered chests, and bundled with hemp rope, silk cloth, gifts of jade, scrolls wrapped in oil, bags of copper coins marked with square holes, the currency of an empire. They pass through the human pass, the Jade Gate, the final threshold between the known and the unknown. But before that, he stands one last time in the court. The Emperor does not rise, but he watches. He says, but to witness, bring me back the shape of what lies beyond our reach. Jungkian bows again, but his silence is complete. Outside, a bell tolls, low, deep. The caravan waits, and so, with quiet steps, the man leaves behind scrolls and polished floors for strangers, for a road not yet drawn. The court returns to its silence, but from this point forward, the world will never be the same. Captivity among the Xiongnu now. Let the world shift once more. The quiet corridors of the Han Court fade into memory. Silk robes are exchanged for dust-streaked cloaks, and the steady rhythm of travel is broken by something sudden. Jongkion has not yet reached his goal, but he will not reach it quickly. Instead, he is taken. The Xiongnu, fierce horse archers of the northern steppes, descend without fanfare. There is no pitched battle, no clash of armies. Just a few tense moments, a scattering of sand, and Jongkion is in their hands. It is not the end. They do not torture him. They are not cruel, not in the way stories might suggest, but they do keep him for years, more than a decade, 13 years, in a world that is not his. And here, the story becomes slower, quieter, but no less important. Imagine a plain, endless and wind-swept, yachts scattered across dry grassland, smoke rising in loose spirals from dung-fueled fires, horses in the hundreds, their tails swishing against flies, men on foot or in the saddle, boughs slung across their backs, always alert. Jongkian lives among them as a guest and a captive. He is watched, he is limited in where he can go, but he is not locked away. The Xiongnu do not fear his escape. Where would he go? Beyond them, only desert, and farther still, more enemies. So he remains. But in his mind, the mission does not end. He begins to observe. He listens to their language, rougher than Chinese, laced with Turkic roots and clipped endings. He learns their customs, how disputes are settled by elder warriors, not scribes, how alliances are forged through marriage, and feasts of boiled mutton. He watches the children train with small bows. He studies the way tents are arranged in camp. He notes the quality of their horses. In time, the guards become accustomed to his presence, laugh softly at his accent. He is not one of them. But he is no longer entirely foreign. He is between. And still, he waits. Years pass. Jongkian marries, whether by force or by circumstance. The records do not say, but his wife is Xiongnu, and they have a child. For many, that would mark the end of ambition, the end of a mission. But for Jongkian, it is only a chapter. He raises the child. He teaches him to speak both tongues. He carves small figures from wood to amuse him, but always he watches the western horizon. And then, one day, he escapes. The record does not give detail. Perhaps he rode away in the dead of night. Perhaps he was released in exchange for favor. Perhaps his captors no longer cared to hold him. What matters is that he leaves, and he does not return home. Instead, as if the years had been but a detour, he still seeks the USE. Now a generation removed from their alliance with the Hun and scattered into distant valleys, his journey is slower now, cautious, but filled with a strange calm, the kind that comes only after losing time and choosing still to walk forward. Along the way, he gathers stories, maps them in memory. He notes where grapes are grown, where coins bear foreign kings' faces, where glass is clearer than any inch. He notes the way language shifts. Sogdian, he finds them, the USE, but they are not the warrior nomads the Han court imagined. They have settled, built towns, planted fields. They listen to Jungkyeon's message with respect. They are finished with war. Jungkyeon does not argue. He bows and he turns east, not defeated, not disillusioned, but full of knowledge, full of new roads. And so, he begins the journey home, beyond the mountains, to the USE. Now, the mountains rise before him, not as walls, but as waves. Stone ridges stacked high, their snowy tops catching the sun like mirrors. They do not intimidate Jongkian. After 13 years of captivity, the air grows thinner, breath shorter. The sky deepens to a high, pale blue. The silence changes. Birds soar on the high currents, and far below, streams carve through dark rock. He moves through passes, his clothes now patched and sun-bleached, his scrolls tucked tightly against his chest. The wind, he does not know precisely where the USE dwell. They were once a migratory power, a tribal confederation cast out by the Xiongnu long ago. But time softens, and people change. Still, he follows whispers. In mountain villages, he meets men with dark hair and lighter eyes, traders who wear Greek signet rings, but speak Sogdian and offer salted cheese wrapped in wool. They know of the USE. They point west. Weeks pass. He crosses rivers. He follows the tracks of caravans half a season ahead. He meets children who've never heard of the Han. He finds them. The USI, you may imagine Bactria as a soft valley wrapped in mountains, warm winds, fields of grain that ripple like silk beneath the sun, cities with low stone walls and shaded courts, a place that once belonged to Alexander's successors, Greeks who carved amphitheaters into hillsides and stamped coins with Olympian gods. Now, the USI have made it home. Jongkian approaches not as a messenger of authority, but as a traveler bearing news. He brings silk, polished bronze, writings from the Han court. He is welcomed. He is given a shaded seat. He drinks water, steeped with mint. He eats soft bread and honey. The USE chieftains speak of peace. They are no longer warriors. They have no quarrel with the Xiongnu. Their battles are behind them. They trade now. Their wealth comes not from conquest, but from position between India, Persia, and the East. They sit at the crossroads of worlds, but they offer knowledge, and Jiang Qian, always listening, accepts this with grace. He does not plead. He does not argue. Instead, he asks questions. He learns of the Parthians' masters, of archery and diplomacy. where elephants are used not only for war, but for processions. He hears of Roman merchants reaching eastern ports with coins heavy as jade, and of southern routes lined with fragrant resins and ivory. He takes notes, not on paper, but in memory. And all the while, he watches the weavers as they stretch wool across frames, the dye vats that bubble with indigo and madder, the way horses are bred not for burden. And in it all, he sees not allies, threads that might one day be drawn together. He spends the winter among them. In the evenings, he sits beneath oil lamps, listens to music played on stringed instruments with sweet, sad tone. He observes their coinage, their writing. The desire to complete his mission transforms. It is no longer about returning with an alliance. It is about returning with vision. The USI do not walk east with him, but their presence will live in his words. Soft rains fall. As he descends from the plateau, the rivers run stronger now. The road, if it can be called that, is a string of mud paths and wind-swept ridges. He walks, not as a prisoner. When he sleeps, he dreams of scripts written in alphabets he can't yet read, of cities with domes like of spices that burn gently on the tongue, and of horses that run like fire across the steppe. His journey turns east again, toward home. But in truth, home has expanded, the world has grown, and Jangkyeon carries it. Now, quietly, humbly, inside himself. Now, let your thoughts settle gently as we begin the slow walk home. The deserts return, the wind returns, not as a hero, not as a conqueror, but as something far rarer, a witness. His clothes are worn, his face older, the lines of sand and wind written into his skin, his boots patched with foreign leather. It has been over 13 years since he first stepped beyond the Jade Gate. The court believed him lost. Many assumed him dead. But now, he arrives quietly in no fanfare, only the hush of whispered surprise and the slow rising of eyebrows in disbelief. When Jongkyeon kneels before Emperor Wu, his forehead touches stone, and Jongkyeon does. But he does not return empty-handed. He brings no army, no treaty, no land, but he carries stories, not fables, not entertainment, but information, knowledge, structure. He begins to speak, and the court listens. He tells them of the USE. He describes their clothing, their customs, their reluctance to war. He describes Bactria, its remnants of Greek governance, its silver coins and stone streets, its people, neither entirely Eastern nor Western, but something in between. He tells of Parthians. He speaks of India, where the air is thick with spice, where the people read from palm leaf manuscripts. He speaks of roots, of towns that buy silk at high prices, of roads where jade flows west and horses flow east, of places where men from distant lands, Rome, perhaps, trade coins with Chinese markings, not yet knowing the land they came from. He does not bring these goods, but he brings their map for hours perhaps days. The court listens, scribes take note, cartographers consult. The blank western spaces on imperial scrolls are slowly filled, not with certainty, but with imagination guided by evidence. And from this, the beginnings of the Silk Road are born, not paved, not declared, not even named, just not used. Over the next decades, caravans follow his path, and slowly, the edge of the Han world begins to breathe outward. Jankian does not retire into wealth. There are no great estates given, his journey written down in the records of the grand historian. He is sent again, later, to the Fergana Valley, where tall horses, famed for their speed and strength, are sought by Emperor Wu. Jonkion negotiates with care. Again, not for war, but for understanding, he succeeds. The horses become a symbol, a bond between East and West, and so, quietly, Jonkion becomes the thread between worlds. Not a bridge, but a thread, worn, weathered, strong. He dies without glory, without wealth, but with something far more durable, and long after the scrolls he dictated faded into dust, long after the roads he travelled were buried or rerouted, the impact remained. Trade, exchange, connection. The greatest impact comes not from conquest, but from curiosity. Not from what we take, but from what we bring back. And so, tonight, if you find yourself walking in a dream, imagine following a slow caravan through foreign hills, your hands holding a scroll, and remember that somewhere, long ago, a man walked farther than anyone had asked him to, and came home not to be praised, but to tell what he had seen. That is how roads begin, with footsteps, and with listening, a silence deeper than before, not the quiet of rest, but the quiet of abandonment, a hush that has lasted not for hours or days, but for centuries. The wind moves here, but it moves alone. You walk across a flat plain of coarse sand and crumbled salt. Your boots crunch on ground that once bore the footsteps of thousands, traders, monks, scribes, servant, children. This was once Lulan, but once a living city on the very edge to the ancient traveller, but situated at the crossing of rivers and sand, where water once flowed. There was no oasis more important, no place nor symbolic of survival between extremes. It is gone, its streets erased, its people vanished. And yet, traces remain. Imagine your steps slowing as you walk into the faint outline of what was once a gate, to posts barely rising above ground like broken teeth. The wind carries no voices here, only the whisper of possibility. Archaeologists who've come in recent decades describe it this way: a city interrupted. They found remains, clay walls, thick but cracked, wooden beams, still holding their shape after 2,000 years, even the remains of letters written on wooden slips, each one a message intended for someone that never quite arrived. You kneel beside a fragment. The wood is dark with age, but the ink, a soft black, is still visible. It speaks not of gods, not of war, but of grain shipments. A disagreement about prices. Every day matters. Further in, you come upon what was once a central house, partially excavated now, its wooden skeleton exposed. The doorway is narrow. Inside, archaeologists once found textiles folded in corners, delicate, dyed silk, woven with intricate geometric shapes. In another room, a loom still stood, but the frame untouched. And beyond that, a child's shoe, small, soft-soled. You look around and imagine the day it was left behind, perhaps as the sands advanced, or perhaps it was simply outgrown, forgotten, and buried by time. Lulan stood near the Lop Noa, a lake that once expanded and contracted like a lung. Its waters fed the region. The water changed course. Silt filled the canals. The wind began to bite deeper. It was not destroyed. They took what they could. And what could not be carried was swallowed by the sand. And yet, curiously, the things they left behind are often the most intimate. A necklace made from soft stone beads, worn smooth by fingers. A spindle still wound with thread. Lulan did not shout. It whispered, and it still does. The archaeologists who came in the early 20th century, explorers like Sven Hedden and Aral Stein, were among the first to listen. They camped amid the ruins, their tents flapping at night in the dry wind, their lanterns casting long shadows across clay walls that had not known firelight in 1,000 years. They collected documents, scraps, tools. Some they took to museums, others they left where they lay. And to this day, Lulan remains unclaimed by time. No one lives here, but it is not forgotten. It remains as a ghostly presence on every map of the Silk Road, and in that absence there is space for wonder. The heat of the day has begun to fade. The wind brushes your face. Somewhere behind you, sand shifts. The weight of stories buried beneath your feet. The stillness of lives, the enduring truth that even the most fragile cities can leave echoes deep enough to hear. If you only sit and listen ... Buddhist art in the desert you walk now, not through ruins, but through color. Faded, yes. Cracked, yes. But still vibrant enough to surprise you. Not far from the vanished cities of Lulan, clinging to cliffs or nestled into the earth, lie temples carved by hand, painted by monks who believed in patience more than permanence. This is the spiritual side of the Silk Road, a place where Buddhism traveled not by force, but by footsteps, and flourished not in palaces, but in caves. You find yourself in front of one such cave now. Perhaps in Kazil or Magao or Beziklik, all names carried by scholars, but all sharing the same sacred hush. The entrance is simple, stone worn smooth by time. Perhaps an overhang where wind once shielded a seated monk from sun. The light dims, the scent of dust softens, and there, on the walls, unfold scenes painted by hands, now long at rest. Figures in soft robes, outlined in delicate black lines, filled with ochre, lapis, vermilion, mineral colors ground from stone and soil. bodhisattvas with half-lowered eyes, Buddhas seated in lotus pose, hands raised in quiet gestures, flying celestial beings, Apsaras, their scarves curling behind them like smoke, their faces calm, serene, eternal. The silence of the cave is complete, but it is not empty. It speaks. This art is not meant to dazzle. It is meant to still the mind. Their names are lost. Their reward was not fame, but devotion. And yet, what they left behind is exquisite. You move slowly. In one frame, he is an elephant. In another still, a soft lesson. The artists, mineral by mineral, to make blue. They crushed lapis lazuli, brought overland from Afghanistan. To make green, they ground malach. To bind the pigment, local. Even the brush hairs were chosen with purpose. Weasel for precision. And though centuries have passed, some eyes still gaze back at you. Soft, timeless, present. These caves were not only temples, they were waypoints, places of rest for travelers, shelter, reflection. Imagine a merchant, dusty and worn, stepping into one such sanctuary. He sets down his pack, washes his hands, and sits. No need for ritual, only the presence of art. Inside, the silence glows. But not all expression was made with pigment. Some of the most delicate texts and textiles of the Buddhist Silk Road were found not on walls, but in storage, folded, buried, preserved. You pass into another chamber, handwritten sutras, transcribed by candlelight, on silk, paper, lines of Sanskrit, among them manuscripts, on medicine, astrology, letters home. There are stamps from donors, tiny corrections in the margins, as human as they are ancient. And next to these scrolls, fragments of textile, not for sale, but for ritual. You lift a piece gently in your hands. A woven panel, red and gold, patterned with lotus petals and flame. The silk is brittle now, but still shimmers faintly under your fingers. It may have once wrapped a statue, or hung beside a mural, or been offered outside, but here, inside these stone-carved chapels, something was preserved. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a mood, a stillness, a shared humanity. You sit, cross-legged, as others did, breathing in slowly, letting the painted eyes meet yours. And in that moment, time disappears. You are no longer a visitor, part of the same breath, the same gaze, the same silent longing for clarity that moved those brush strokes so long ago. Mummies in the silence, faces of the past. The wind over the Tarim basin is dry and very old. It moves in low gusts across gravel plains and dunes of fine powdery sand. It sings through red beds that no longer grow. It whispers through graves that no one tends. This is a place of burial, but also of unexpected presence, because here, in the soft earth of forgotten cemeteries, but mummies, not wrapped in mystery, but in wool and time. Let the image be still. Do not imagine horror. There is no tomb robbing here. The Tarim, mummies, as they are known, rest in natural preservation. They were not embalmed. They were not intended to last forever, but the desert chose otherwise. The air is so dry, the soil so alkaline, the wood of the coffin so tightly woven, skin darkened to leather, hair preserved, red, brown, even blonde, fingernails intact. Some have eyes that, though sunken, they were first unearthed, not by treasure hunters. Graves rising from dunes like soft hills. The people buried here lived around 1800 BCE, long before the Silk Road as we know it. They spoke no known tongue. They built no great cities, and yet they left behind themselves. The beauty of Shawer, as she has been named, is one such figure. She lies in a coffin shaped like a boat, her face serene, lips gently closed, her body swaddled in woolen wraps, dyed crimson and brown. A carved wooden post once stood above her burial, perhaps marking her spirit's passage, or simply remembering. Others lie in similar poses, each in their own chamber of stillness. Infants placed beside mothers, hands folded across chests, boots pointing upward. As if to continue walking, you might imagine the burial itself. Nor you, the mourners, likely said no grand words. They may have sung, they may have wept. They likely poured water, or placed a final ribbon of cloth beneath the hand. They raised sheep, wove cloth, traded with whoever came through. They built wooden dwellings near lakes that have since vanished. They ate barley, dairy, and wild plants. They carved tools. They wore patterned trousers, felt hats, and leather boots. Their graves contain not gold, but care, a comb, a pouch of herbs, an infant's doll made of string and red, an old man buried with a string of wooden beads wrapped around his wrist. We do not know their names. No writings remain. Their language, if it was written, has not been found. But their presence speaks anyway. Anthropologists and archaeologists who study these remains do so gently. Soft brushes, gloved hands, shallow breaths, not to disturb, but to listen. From the shape of a skull, they map ancestry. From the weave of a tunic, from a single lice egg preserved in a braid, they date time. Even their DNA tells a story of movement long before the maps caught up. The Taklamakan desert was not always empty. It was a thread of life, and here, to the slow work of hand-spun cloth, to the tenderness of a burial made with few words, to the dignity of lives unwritten, you kneel beside one shallow grave, now housed in a museum, carefully displayed, respectfully preserved. You see the wrinkles at the corner of the eye, the soft hollow of the collarbone, a single wool thread still looped through the hem, and you feel not fear, but recognition, because this is not a spectacle, an echo given shape. A silence that never needed to shout to endure. You rise, dust the sand from your knees, and walk on, not to escape, but to carry the presence with you. These people never walked the Silk Road. They predated it, but they remind us that the desert does not forget. It holds, it keeps, it waits, and sometimes it gives back a face, The desert as archive imagined a place where nothing is truly gone. Not because it was built to last, but because the world forgot to destroy it. That is what the desert does. Not just the Taklamakan, but the whole sweep of Inner Asia. That vast arc from Turpan to Dunhuang, from Nia to Miran, where wind is the only librarian. Here, beneath the dunes, beneath the crusted earth, lie pages of human presence. Not in books, but in fragments. A piece of silk, folded gently and forgotten. A comb, dropped behind a door. A sandal with a broken strap. A tax receipt. The desert has no need for meaning. It preserves indiscriminately. But for those who know how to listen, you walk slowly across a flat expanse, marked only by small rizzes of earth, where someone has placed a single flag to indicate where to dig. Nearby, archaeologists crouch beside a rectangular trench. They work without haste, no rush. They speak in whispers, not because they must, but because the silence asks it of them. Each object uncovered is a sentence. Each layer of sand, they dig for context. But a shoe found beside a wall, next to a cooking pot, under the edge of a weathered doorframe, becomes a moment. A life paused. Many of these sites were first uncovered in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Explorers like Errol Stein, Paul Pelliot, stories told by caravan guides in the caves near Dunhuang. They opened a room that had been sealed for nearly 1,000 years. Inside, scrolls stacked like firewood, some Buddhist sutras, contracts, diaries. It was a time capsule, an accidental library, closed not to be hidden. And here we are, in recent years, beneath dunes that seem empty, lie tracers of walled towns, stone roads, market stalls, and irrigation channels dry for 1,000 years. From space, the desert looks like a blank sheet, but up close, it is annotated. A coin pressed deep into a kitchen floor, a single letter in Korosti's script, addressed to a name we will never know. Each one an echo, and perhaps that is what the Silk Road really was. Not a single road, not a trade route, interrupted often, written in dust and silence and cloth. A merchant wraps his wares in silk. A scribe copies a prayer onto rice paper. A guard scratches a date into the handle of his knife. And none of them know that what they leave behind will speak louder than their voices ever could. You stand now on a dune's edge. Sand flows, like time reversed. You close your eyes, and you realize is not dead. And if you listen long enough, if you walk slow enough, you'll hear it say, "We moved, we met, and we left something behind." The desert has not buried the past. It has kept it, softly, carefully, like a mother placing a letter in a box to be opened. When the world is ready to read it, the taste of silk, a single delicate leaf of the white mulberry tree, upon it, a caterpillar barely visible begins to eat. It eats and eats and eats. Again, will wrap the shoulders of emperors, will stretch across continents, traded for gold, glass, and even horses. This is where silk begins, not in splendor, The silkworm spins its cocoon, soft yet strong, fine as breath. And somewhere in the eastern hills of China, that thread is gently boiled, softened, drawn out by hand, stretched, spooled, dyed, woven. The result, a piece of fabric, unlike anything else in the known world, smooth, light, yet insulating, able to shimmer with movement, changing with the flicker of a candle or the sway of a dancer's arm. To touch silk was to know privilege. In the courts of the Han dynasty, silk was more than clothing. It was currency. An official would know his rank by the pattern of his robe. Clouds, and not everyone could wear it. Laws written in careful strokes of ink declared who could and who could not. A farmer could not wear silk, nor could a common soldier, nor a merchant, though he might carry it for months across the desert. Even within the palace, some were embroidered with gold thread, some with pearls sewn at intervals, some were painted. The emperor himself wore robes so finely woven, the fabric was almost weightless. It trailed behind him like mist, and when he moved, it was said, the air around him seemed to shift, as though he altered not just the chords. The taste for silk was not limited to China. As early as the 2nd century BCE, silk threads found their way to the Parthian Empire, where nobles wrapped it around their waists, letting the ends hang in long, fluttering panels. Later, in Rome, senators would whisper about Syrica, the land of silk, and Roman women would beg for dresses so sheer they were accused of indecency. The Senate passed laws trying to ban its use, but silk kept coming. It was irresistible. Each bolt traveled thousands of miles, changing hands a dozen times, growing more valuable with each step westward. A single handkerchief-sized scrap, and yet, for the elites, it was not about comfort, nor display. Silk was used to wrap sacred objects, to bind books, to drape over the bodies of the deceased. A princess might wear a veil of it on her wedding day, then be wrapped in another on her final journey to the tomb. But silk was not just for wearing. In the Tang dynasty, centuries later, poets wrote on it. Painters illustrated stories of immortals and lovers upon scrolls woven from the same threads as imperial robes. To write upon silk was to whisper to eternity. In the Sassanid Empire, lions, birds of paradise, fire altars, and winged gods, all woven into palace curtains, each fold telling a story of lineage and divine right. In Byzantium, they tried to mimic it, but for centuries, the secret remained, kept by the Chinese with the same care as a royal heir. Silkworms were guarded, the mulberry trees watched, and the punishment for smuggling cocoons, carried by hands cracked from desert wind, tucked in pouches lined with straw, hidden beneath spices and scrolls. It was not only bought, it was desired, and desire moves faster than horses. In palaces from Baghdad to Bukhara, silk draped over couches, hung in doorways, lined the hems of turbans. A visiting ambassador might receive a gift of 2 bolts, each folded in a wooden chest, scented with myrrh, and even as they unfurled the cloth, they would feel the message beneath the softness. We are civilized. We are refined. We are part of the world you wish to know. It was subtle. It was tactile. It was impossible to ignore. But perhaps most remarkable is how those who valued silk most often saw it as something to be hidden. A glimpse of a sleeve, the edge of a collar. It was not shouted from rooftops. It was whispered through texture. Even today, it dims, yes, phrase, but it still catches the light. It still draws the eye. It still holds the weight of fingers long gone, and of empires that clothed themselves in softness, while shaping the sharp edges of the world. You imagine now the emperor, a private robe of soft cream, a final layer, deep red, its hem patterned with mountains, its cuffs embroidered with cranes. He walks the corridor slowly. The light touches the fabric. It shivers. He does not speak. He does not need to. Silk says everything. Persian traders and Roman gold now step away from the silken stillness of the palace. Walk down gently into the hum of market streets. Let the hush of candlelit corridors be replaced by the rustle of cloth, the clink of scales, the language of trade. Here, they move the world, from the 1st century BCE to well into the medieval period. The flow of goods across the Silk Roads was rarely direct. A bolt of silk made in eastern China might pass through a dozen hands before arriving in Rome or Antioch. At each stage, it was marked, admired, taxed, handled, and repacked. And those who carried it were rarely silent. They were merchants, Persian traders, most notably a Specian empire, who operated with remarkable subtlety. They were not warriors, but their knowledge of routes, of languages, of markets, made them just as influential. Picture now a man in layered robes. One ring might mark him as a servant of the Zoroastrian fire temples. Another, a membership in a caravan guild. Another still, proof of passage. He carries no sword, but on his belt hang keys, 2 leather trunks, filled with cinnamon. He speaks not just Persian, but Bactrian, Sogdian, Greek, Arabic. He greets each person in their tongue, and he knows how much salt is worth in a northern pass. The Persians were masters of networks, and in their cities Neshapur, Ray, Merv, Ctesiphon you could find anything. Roman glass, Chinese scrolls, Indian ivory, spices from Java, amber from the Baltic. But more than objects, you'd find knowledge, shared not with declarations and contracts. In the markets, parchment fluttered on wooden boards, fine wool from the western land, 1 flask of Egyptian unguent, and perhaps most curious of all, coins bearing the faces of men who had never walked these roads. Roman gold aurii with Latin inscriptions, Byzantine solidi, cushioned silver. They passed from hand to hand, not as tribute, but as trusted weight. The Romans, to them, it was the mystery of the East. Pliny the Elder once complained that Roman men had become so enamored of silk that they were wearing it layered over their skin, thus displaying their wives' charms through thin garments, he wrote, with notable disapproval. And yet the demand grew. By the 2nd century CE, Rome was sending tons of gold eastward in exchange for bolts of silk that might have been woven a year earlier in Chengdu or Luzhou. The trade was indirect. There were no Roman merchants in Chang'an, No Chinese traders in Rome. Instead, it passed through intermediaries, Sogdian caravans, Persian brokers, Arab seafarers, and each added a layer of language, a layer of negotiation. By the time a silk robe reached the shoulders of a Roman noblewoman, it had traveled perhaps 7,000 kilometers, changed hands 20 times, and increased in value 100-fold. The Persian traders orchestrated this movement with precision. They managed timing, knowing when the snows cleared the passes. They managed politics, echoing papers from kings and cities. They managed risked pooling resources, paying tributes, traveling in caravans large enough to discourage thieves. And still, their names are rarely recorded. They left behind no monuments, but in every transaction, they carved a mark. Their ledgers written in ink, on palm leaf scrolls or parchment, list items as carefully as a monk transcribes a sutra. For bolts of silk, 2 jars of saffron, 1 flask of glass beads from Tyre, 7 gold coins bearing Trajan's face. Each entry is a story, not just of objects, but of the invisible hands that held them. It lies not in palaces, but in route, still traceable today. Modern highways often mirror the ancient trade paths they once walked. Modern passports trace the boundaries they helped establish. Even the languages of trade, Arabic numerals, Persian legal phrases, Greek coinage terminology, they worked in the shadows of empire, but they knew its shape. When kings plotted borders, they considered what traders had already charted. When armies marched, they relied on routes that caravans had tested. These traders became the true cartographers of the Silk Road, not with ink, but with footstep and coin. And so, when you imagine the Silk Road, do not imagine it as empty dunes or lone travelers. Imagine a system quietly tended by thousands of traders, each with a pack, each with a plan, each trusting the road not to be safe, but to be known. A banquet in Samarkand. Now, imagine the sun has long since dipped below the mountains. The caravan bells have faded, and ahead of you glows the low light of a city, Samarkand, gently alive under the velvet hush of night. You enter not through a gate. The air is thick with roasted meats, sweetened wine, crushed herbs, and bread just pulled from an earth oven. There is no rush, no shouting, just the quiet preparations of a place that knows luxury well and wears it without excess. This is not a city of gold towers. It is a city of courtyards, where light, but within, the lamps glow warmer, their light made softer by silk screens and colored glass. You are invited to a banquet, not as a guest of honor, to listen, to see, to absorb the rhythm of elite life far removed from the hardship of trade routes. Your sandals touch cool stone. A servant in blue leads you beneath an arch draped with dyed linens. Inside, a low table inlaid with silver, set with ceramic dishes from China, goblets of etched glass from Syria, and bowls painted with gold calligraphy. Everything whispers refinement. The Hoster merchant prince. His robe is deep red, but unmistakably fine. He greets each guest with a bow of the head. His words are brief, his eyes calm. Around him, the guests are varied. a Persian diplomat, his accent heavy with courtly training, a Sogdian widow who owns half the dye market in town, a young monk with hands ink-stained from copying scrolls, an envoy from the Abbasid court, careful with his words. All speak different languages, but all speak hospitality. The first dish arrives. Pomegranates split into stars, their seeds gleaming like rubies on ceramic plates. Then small rounds of cheese, bowls of olives. A server places a lamb dish at the table's center. The meat has been roasted with saffron and sumac, stuffed with barberries and rice, its fragrance winding through the air like incense. Each guest eats with their fingers or small spoons. No one rushes. Conversation flows like the warm wine in glass goblets. Topics range from the caravan that arrived 3 nights ago, to the rising taxes on fig shipments, to a new calligrapher from Bog, whose lettering is said to look like music. A musician enters quietly, a man with a rhubarb, a short-necked, lute carved from mulberry wood. He plucks a gentle melody. His music becomes part of the room. You taste the bread. Beside it, a paste made of dates and almonds, spiced with clove. The conversation turns to silk. A guest unfurls a new piece. The host nods, running his fingers along the weave. He makes no comment. The gesture is enough. Elsewhere, a guest recounts a tale from the desert of a traveler who carried a book wrapped in leather, written in a language none could read, but which he guarded more than his water. The story is told not with drama, but with the slow cadence of a man who respects silence. A bowl of sherbet arrives, made from pressed grape, rose water, and crushed ice, brought down from the mountains. You sip, and slightly bitter, perfect for the moment. It's a short verse. The words hang in the air like perfume. What was traded was not gold, but longing. What was carried was not silk, but story. No one claps, but many nod. By now, the stars outside are high. The courtyard's fountain catches their light, sending small ripples across the mosaic floor. The banquet slows. Guests lean back, sigh. No deals were struck tonight. No alliances formed, but something passed between them nonetheless. Not in paper, but in gesture, is how power was often shared on the Silk Road, through the patient unfolding of human connection over food, music, and mutual regard. You rise slowly, bowing to your host. The room feels lighter than when you entered, not louder, just more full. You walk once more into the night. The air has cooled. The scent of saffron lingers faintly on your fingers. Somewhere behind you, laughter echoes softly, and above, the stars continue. Perhaps the flow of goods, ideas, and people that passed through this city and into memory. The flow of ideas, knowledge, belief, and books. Now, imagine the desert again. Open a stillness that makes the mind stretch. Along its quiet arteries walked not only merchants, but seekers. Men and women who carried nothing more valuable than words. Some written. This was the intellectual Silk Road, and perhaps more enduring. In the cool stone halls of Dunhuang monks wrote with ink made from pine soot and water, carefully transcribing Buddhist sutras onto silk or long rolls of paper that would stretch across the room. They wrote in Chinese, but sometimes also in Sanskrit. These scrolls were carried west, tucked under robes, rolled and sealed with cord, read by torchlight in desert caves, recited by memory when the ink had faded. In the oases of Khotan, Buddhism bloomed, but so too did storytelling. Chitakatali's stories of the Buddha's past lives were not just written, but sung, painted, and even acted in seasonal festivals. The talis traveled with the traders, not because they were useful, and so a merchant from Bactria might hear of a prince who gave up his wealth to save a deer. A weaver in Samarkand might tell his child about a monkey king who crossed rivers to protect his tribe. These were more than religion. They were cultural threads, tying people to one another. But knowledge did not only move from east to west. From India came not just religion, but mathematics, the concept of zero, decimal notation. These ideas traveled slowly, not shouted from rooftops, but passed between scribes in dim libraries, between students at the feet of a teacher. In the cities of Persia, these ideas were translated. Arabic scholars in Baghdad, particularly at the House of Wisdom, took Sanskrit texts and gave them new life in a new tongue. Greek philosophy, carried in codices and scrolls across the Levant, preserved and debated by Muslim scholars who did not fear their foreignness. Wisdom is the lost property of the believer, they said. Wherever it is found, it is more rightful for him to claim it. And so, belief and knowledge sat side by side, translated, copied. An Nestorian Christian might learn astronomy from an Arab scholar. A Muslim geographer might cite Indian observations of eclipses. Knowledge moved, not like a flood, in libraries, not in rows, but in bundles wrapped in cloth, tied with string, labeled with slips of bone or clay. A scribe's room was a small place, a desk of wood, a candle in a niche, ink drying on a flat stone, a window through which dust filtered softly in the afternoon. And yet, from such rooms, ideas stepped into the world, and not all knowledge was practical. A Persian verse might find its way into a Chinese court. A Temp's poem might be translated by a monk in Kucha. And language itself changed. The scripts of the Silk Road Sogdian, side by side, each one with its own beauty. And though few could read them all, those who could became bridges. Translators, most are nameless, but their labor remains in faded ink and the quiet survival of thought. In the monasteries of Turfan, we find dictionaries written by hand. In Marv, students studied astronomy with charts drawn from Indian models, aligned with Babylonian stars. In Balkh, a Christian scribe copied a Buddhist text, not to convert, but to record. What did they think as they wrote? Did they pause and wonder about the man whose hand had formed the earlier letters? Did they nod quietly in recognition? Ideas did not require wealth to travel, only time and care and silence. Even today, scholars find fragments of books, half a page, a few lines, names we no longer know, ideas we still ponder, and perhaps This is what the Silk Road truly carried. Not just fabric, not just spice, but the softest, most enduring cargo of all: understanding. The last caravan has disappeared into the horizon. The scrolls have been rolled, and the musicians have gone silent. We find ourselves in the final hour, not of history. You've journeyed now, not only through places, through the soft unfolding of ordinary moments that, across centuries, wove themselves into something vast and human. From the worn sandals of a Roman potter, to the shimmering silk robes of an emperor, from the ink-stained hands of a monk, to the dusty fingers of a merchant measuring cinnamon by the handful, from salt carried on the backs of camels, to gold that clinked softly inside carved chests. These were the lives that made history without trying, and it is their unimportance, their quiet repetition, their smallness in the grand scheme, that makes them worth remembering. The Silk Road was never a road, really. It was a relationship between cities and steppes, between beliefs and ideas, between strangers who never knew each other's names, but who knew how to weigh trust, how to balance a ledger, how to share tea by the fire. There were deserts, yes. There were dangers. There were wars and failures and forgotten cities, swallowed by time. But there were also moments like this: a low table, a hand reaching out not to strike, but to trade. You close your eyes now. Somewhere behind your eyelids, you see the soft flicker of an oil lamp against tile, a curtain lifting in the breeze, the edge of a silk sleeve catching the last of the afternoon light, and far away, a bell tied to the neck of a camel echoes just once. But the sound, you are resting now, wrapped not in silk, and as sleep approaches, gentle, sure, unhurried, remember this: the road never ends. It only slows, it softens, it drifts, and in the hush that follows, the past remains, not to trouble you, but to accompany you, silently, like the whisper of worn fabric, like the scent of old parchment. And may your dreams travel gently through time and story and stillness.